serious, what is the most paranormal or unexplainable events you have witnessed? I have one. It must have been some kind of hallucination, but it really scared me. I was sitting in my bed watching YouTube for a couple hours. I got up and reached forward to set something on my nightstand or whatever. I had this strange undescribable feeling that I hadn't actually moved from where I was sitting at all. I quickly turned around and looked at where I was sitting seconds before, and there I was, still sitting there. I was outside my body. I could see the shocked, horrified expression come to my face at such a strange sight. I quickly sat back down right in the same spot and nothing strange happened again. I'll bring out this story again. It happened to me 7 years ago and I can't figure it out, but I lost an hour of time in what felt to me like minutes. At the time I was working from home after a serious illness diagnosis. I had settled into a routine, up at 7 a.m. and do house stuff and shower, then at 8 a.m. start prepping my work and laying out my day. Phone calls and emails from 8 to 9. This is all I remember. It was 7:55 and I brewed a cup of Keurig coffee on my kitchen located on the main floor of my house. I went upstairs to my office and turned on my computer to settle in and realized I forgot the coffee in the kitchen. I went back downstairs and got the coffee as soon as I realized I forgot it. Couldn't have been more than the time it took Windows to boot up, but I took a sip and the coffee was cold. Not warm, but actually cold. I thought my Keurig was broke, but I looked at the clock and it said 9:14. So whereas I expected it to be 8:05 max, somehow an hour and 10 minutes passed without explanation. It was very bothersome. I have no idea where that hour went. I have never had any blackout before or since, no seizures, and the meds I was on shouldn't have caused a lapse like that. I don't think I fell asleep because I distinctly remember typing my password and saying out loud, "Shit, I forgot the coffee." It kinda left me uneasy a bit. Nothing like it ever happened to me before or since. After my dad passed away, my stepmom kept asking me if I found the book he was reading in his last months. She didn't know the title. We looked all over the house for it. Eventually found it with a stack of magazines, definitely not where it belonged in the house. My stepmom recognized it immediately when found. The title of the book was Hello from Heaven. I also received a phone call 2 days after he passed away. The phone call was from his phone number. For some reason I was too scared to answer. Asked the only person who had the phone, stepmom, if she had called from it. She said she left it in the garage where he always worked. This was 14 years ago. I still regret not answering the phone. About 5 years ago my husband and I went to visit his grandma. Big, beautiful 2-story house. I was going to head upstairs to put some pajamas on and saw a woman walk across the top of the stairs. It was only my husband, young daughter and his grandma in the house, and whoever I saw wasn't Granny. I went in the living room and told them what I saw, and his grandma goes, "Yeah, that's Lori. She visits a lot." Lori was my husband's mom who had died when he was 11. I was so fucking spooked after that I barely slept the rest of the time we were there. I was in my laundry room, and I heard someone come up behind me, and I swear they whispered. I screamed so loud and thought it was my husband playing a prank on me. When I turned around no one was there, and it was so freaky. Also, when I was a teenager I was sitting in my room at my computer desk, and piece of paper and pen went up in the air and slammed back down. I ran downstairs to tell my mom, and I was crying hysterically. My mom thinks I just hallucinated it. On the day my father died I was alone in the apartment we lived in. While everyone was out mourning at my uncle's, I stayed home because I didn't want people to stare at me sobbing. Anyways, I'm in the living room and I hear footsteps in my mother's room that has a balcony. I straight up hear the balcony door open, so now I'm like sobbing and shouting asking who's there. I go check it out and there's no one there except a strong smell of tobacco in the room. My father used to smoke on the balcony. Never told anyone about it and just kept it for myself. Later learned my mother got blamed for my dad's death, even though they loved each other since they were teens and my dad was simply a victim of cancer, and a massive brawl broke out. So I just thought of it as my dad coming home because he couldn't be bothered to hear people arguing. After my mother died I went to her grave a few times a week. I usually had my kids with me, and this one day as we passed all the older cemeteries my eldest son, who was 6 at the time, asked Mom, "What are all those people waiting for? Why are they just standing there?" The cemetery was empty and not a single human was there. When we got to my mom's grave he held my hand and said, "Don't worry, Grandma is with Mom and they are happy." Mom was my mother's sister who passed away before my husband and I were even married. My son knew nothing of her or what we called her. He also would tell us when someone had died in a house. My stepdad found our puppy Eddie on the side of the road. Someone had thrown him out of a moving car, and he had broken legs, broken teeth, a swollen and closed eye, and was severely dehydrated. My stepdad took him to the vet and paid quite a bit of money for surgeries to get Eddie fixed up. He got attached to the doggo, so we ended up adopting him. After that, even though he was the family dog, he was best buds with my stepdad. Anywhere my stepdad was around the house, you could find Ed tagging along. Eddie and I grew up together. He died while I was in college, and my parents buried him in a pet cemetery. Since it was sort of sudden and I was far away, I didn't get to say goodbye. A few months after that, I had a dream where Eddie comes and find me. His hair is matted and dirty, and his flesh looks kind of rotted, but he's wagging his tail and seems really happy to see me again. Eddie starts leading me down a hazy path, and the farther we go, the faster his tail wags. Finally, we get to this giant wall of mist that extends across the entire horizon and rises higher than I can see. Eddie gets real close to it before trotting back to me. He licks my hand, gives me a couple of nose boops and whines a little. Then he turns around again and starts to do that happy dog prance toward the wall until he finally passes through it. I can sort of see his outline jumping up and down excitedly next to a human-shaped figure. I jog after Eddie and reach my hand out to touch the wall, hoping I'll be able to pass through it, too. That's when my cell phone rings in real life, waking me up. When I answer it, my mom is on the other end crying. My stepdad had just died of a heart attack. A few years ago, about a year after we moved into our house, my mom and I were home alone with our dog. I was in one bedroom and my mom was in another right across the hall. I heard my dog's toy squeaking down at the end of the hall, so I figured she was playing with it, no big deal. Then my dog came running into the bedroom, without a toy, but the squeaking continued. My dog was running around like crazy, in and out of the bedrooms as if she was trying to figure out where the squeaking was coming from. I figured my mom was teasing her, trying to get her to play. It continued for a few minutes and my dog was getting crazier and crazier until my mom called across the hall for me to stop squeaking the damn toy, you're making the dog crazy. So I stepped into the hallway and said, I don't have the toy, I thought you were squeaking it. At this point the squeaking had stopped, and we were both freaked out, standing right next to each other with the dog sitting between us. We looked down the hallway and the toy was sitting there, nothing touching it. Suddenly it started squeaking like crazy, as if someone were jumping up and down on it. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up and I was frozen in place. My mom almost started crying. The energy was just so weird, I can't even explain it. Turns out the previous owners had a dog that died in the house, and they told my parents that the ghost of the dog comes around from time to time. Now, I've always been iffy about the existence of ghosts, but I swear that ghost dog was playing with my dog's toy. When I was in high school, my younger brother and I shared a bedroom. His bed was on one side of the room and mine was on the other. My brother was an avid sleepwalker and would also talk in his sleep all of the time. Sharing a bedroom with him, it was unsettling at first, but I eventually got used to it. One night, it's about 3 a.m. and I suddenly wake up from a deep sleep, instantly alert. I had this urge to look towards my brother's bed. I felt a presence in the room. When I turned my head, I saw a tall, skinny shadow/human-like figure and it was reaching its hand down towards my sleeping brother's face. Its hand got maybe an inch away before its head jerked to the side and looked at me staring at it, frozen. The shadow then faded and moved up into the air, vanishing through the ceiling. Immediately, my brother shot up out of his bed, stood, and walked to the light switch. He turned it on and looked at me. In a very calm and solemn voice, he says, "Did you feel it? Did you feel the hand?" He then turned off the light and went back to his bed. I hid under my covers the rest of the night. My brother doesn't remember any of it. I used to live in a town that was pretty strange altogether, but the house was even more so. Most of my elder family that grew up there have also had weird experiences. I remember one time, I got up to use the toilet, the bathroom was next door, which was across the way from my bedroom, and I shit you not, a woman in a full vintage nurse's outfit came running out of the bathroom with a washcloth and into my bedroom. I have no idea if there used to be a poorly person accommodating it years ago, but the house was very old. That is the good side of it though, there's a lot more. You'd even sit there sometimes and have this awful feeling of a bad presence. As if somebody was staring at you, eyes burning into your soul kind of feeling, you know? Freaky stuff. I was 10 years old. It was a Sunday morning, between 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. My mother was in the kitchen preparing lunch. As she was washing the veggies, the water pressure from the tap started to fluctuate. Water would flow, stop flowing, like someone was playing around with the tap. My mom asked out aloud on who's messing with the water pressure. The valve for the water tank was just outside my house, and my dad went to inspect it and I followed him. Nothing was out of place. As we walked back into the house we saw before our very eyes, bloody chicken claw prints emerge one by one. It's like a chicken with bloodied feet walked through the hall. Except there was no chicken. Freaked me the fuck out, but we were just stunned and stood there staring as one footprint emerged after another. There were about 5 or 6 claw prints in all before it stopped. Everyone in my family saw it. We didn't discuss it immediately. My parents just wiped the claw prints off. What made this event worse was the fact that it occurred during a very turbulent period in my household. My mom had schizophrenia, but at that point she wasn't diagnosed yet. She heard voices in her head, hostile voices, and was convinced that there was a grand conspiracy against her and people were planning to kidnap me and my sister. She didn't trust my father, her mother and her siblings. So when something legitimately paranormal happens, it just fucks everything up. Like in a world where bloody chicken prints appear, why wouldn't there be some occult conspiracy? Those few months were the most traumatic of my childhood. My mom was admitted into a psychiatric facility a few weeks later after being diagnosed with schizophrenia. But dealing with her paranoia and violent outbursts against everyone not her children broke my world. Part of me even believed her. Having some legit paranormal shit happening in the middle of the day didn't help at all. 17 years on, she is still on medication, but she is stable and fully functional. Even when she was going through the worst of her schizophrenic episodes, she was never neglectful. Always loving towards her children, always dutiful. But she was overprotective during those times. I was afraid that I'd get schizophrenia because it is somewhat hereditary. My mom's sister became quite unstable a couple of years ago. To complete the double jeopardy of insanity, my dad's sister also had paranoia and her son was admitted for a manic episode. So this propensity for psychotic disorders on both sides of the family tree has made me pretty resolute on not getting married and having kids. Sorry that this post has veered from bloody chicken prints to me offloading about schizophrenia. I never told any friend or GF about it, so I guess I just took this as a chance to vent. Might as well share one. I didn't see a ghost until I was 19 years old and did not believe in them until then. I had the mentality that I'll believe it when I see it. I was at my friend's rental house who had a baby and they kept talking about how their house was haunted. Particularly the room the baby slept in, and that a woman would be seen in white, walking into the baby's room at night. A few times my friend, the husband, would be alone with the baby at night while the wife was at work and see the women walk by the open door in the hallway towards the baby's room while the baby slept. He wouldn't think anything of it at first because he would think it was his wife, then he would remember she's at work and haul ass to the baby's room only to find the kid crying and no one there. Fast forward to my encounter. I was hanging out with my friend, the wife, at their house while my friend, the husband, was at work and helping out watching the baby. Starting hearing a ton of noises and my friend said she just wanted to get the kid, get in the car and leave. I laughed and tried to tell her it was nothing, but I complied. We get to the car and she tells me she forgot the dog and asked if I could go back and get him. I approach the window at the front of the house, peer into it and see the dog standing at the sliding glass door, completely stiff with its tail pointing straight out, barking his ass off. I then look at the reflection and my heart skips several beats as I see the bottom half of a reflection of a woman in white. I nope out of there and tell her I can't go in there and tell her what I saw. We eventually go back inside once the dog slowed on the barking. I was a true believer in ghosts since that days and have had a couple other encounters. One day I was with my friends and suddenly my head started getting heavy and my vision began to white out at the point where I couldn't see anything at all. I immediately thought that someone could have drugged me and asked my friends to help me walk to a place where I could get some air and sit down. My sight was coming back but I couldn't speak or express anything, couldn't respond or answer what my friends were asking. Somehow I got into a trance and it felt like I was seeing my surroundings from an above me perspective. My friend called my mom and she picked me up. I still couldn't respond until I got home and went to the bathroom. 3 days later my mom received a call from my grandpa and I immediately knew what was going on. He told her that my dad had passed away and was found dead in his bathroom. I live with my mom and my dad used to live in another state. The forensic report showed that he died in that exact date and probably around the moment I've had that episode. I have a couple. The first one was when my ex died. I had a 4-month-old daughter with him at the time, but we didn't live together. The night he died, I heard someone walking into the bedroom where my daughter was and very clearly heard his voice talking to her. I called out, thinking he may have came in through the back but no one answered. I found out the next day he died sometime during the night, probably around the time I heard the voice. The second one happened at the last place I lived. It's nothing terribly spooky, but I rented a townhouse and figured out that in my daughter's room there was attic access. I was stoked because that meant I could probably store my Christmas decorations up there. I get a kitchen chair to open it up and I couldn't. Not physically it was easy to open. Something mental stopped me from doing it. I had a huge fear. So I left it alone. Sometimes I'd get really eerie feelings, but I chalked it up to it being the first place I've lived in alone in a while, 2 years at that point, but I don't get those feelings in my new apartment at all. I found out from my neighbor not too long after the attic incident that the guy who lived there before me was a raging alcoholic and hung himself in the house. In my daughter's room. The one with the attic access. I've had a few experiences. But the most confirmed that I have is when my ex, myself and a friend got an apartment together. She would ask if we used her private bathroom, which we never did. But she said she would come home and her mats in her bathroom would be thrown all over. Then later on she was woken up by a voice that said look over here, and she did and saw her keys jingling by the door. She said she rolled over to ignore it to pretend it wasn't there. She moved out shortly after that, so the room was empty. Afterwards, my ex and I saw/heard weird things from that room. One time I was in the living room and heard the shower curtain slide open, the door close on its own, heard movement that shouldn't be there. My ex started using the closet in that room to get changed while I was sleeping since he had to be up at 3 a.m. He said one morning he went to get his uniform and his clothes moved around before he touched any of them. After all of this, a friend and I hung out in the room with a recording device trying to do ghost hunter shit. We did capture some noise from the bathroom, but the only voice recorded that wasn't ours said shut the door. I mentioned this previously in what was more of a joke post than anything, but now that I think more of it, it is pretty serious. Back in 2017 I unfortunately lost my fiancée to organ failure and went into a very deep state of depression. I've been there ever since, but I'm making progress to fight back. Anyway. This night was at a convention in Novi, Michigan 1 year later in April 2018. I caught up with a friend and we decided to have some drinks at the bar. Had some good chats about upcoming conventions and stories about previous events. After a few Long Island iced teas I was already pretty buzzed. The next bad idea comes along just a bit down the hall. I was actually on my way to a concert that was being held at the event, but I got pulled to another room with a friend where the convention was hosting a beer sampling session. You got to try 5 beers. 1 cup from each vendor totally free, and then you ranked each one from best to worst. Me, already being slightly drunk from hard liquor, thought this was a great idea. 40 ounces of beer later and I am smashed. Next another, as we're playing cards with a group of people who invited us to their table, suddenly somebody shows up with a bottle of Mountain Dew that had anything but Mountain Dew in it. I honestly do not remember anything at this point, but according to my friend I drank what looked to be about another 8-ounce cups worth. From this point it's all blur as I am blackout drunk. From what I've been told I was brought back up to my hotel room and left alone, but when my roommate arrived he claims he found me face down in the bathroom floor passed out with an empty pill bottle in the room. It was Benadryl. He called 911 and I was brought to a hospital where I woke up. What I recall though between the time I passed out and woke up was the most vivid dream I've ever had in my life. It was an open room I was standing in with people surrounding me. I don't know any of them except for one, my fiancée. I embraced her for what felt like an hour, but for what I know it could have been seconds. All I remember was telling her I loved her before seeing light shined in my face and slowly waking up. When I woke up, according to the doctors and EMTs, I had to be revived as my heart may have flatlined. Thinking about it, it's entirely possible I may have died, and that was my first vision past where I am now. I thank those doctors for saving my life, as well my friend for calling 911 the second he saw me. Damn it, I'm just about to go to sleep and I do not want to type this story. But it's too good to pass. It happened to 4 different people, in 2 separate occasions. The first one was 8 years ago. I had a roommate who we'll call Karen. I worked in a store not far from our apartment. She texts me while I'm at work, and said, "Hey, can you please open the door? I don't have my keys." I answered, "Sorry Karen, the first can't, I'm at work." Her, him, "I can hear your voice in the apartment." I was super confused, so I sent her a selfie, snap of me at work, with a confused look. She could hear me talking. The apartment had paper walls so she could actually make out what I was saying. A few minutes later her boyfriend arrived, he heard me too, and as soon as they put the key in the door, the voice stopped. Few weeks later, my then best friend and I come back from a bar, or a concert, I don't remember which. We enter my apartment building, and I hear Karen's voice through the door. She had a very loud voice. I look at my friend and on like, looks like Karen's home. I put the key in the door, voice stopped. I get inside, there's no one there. My best friend had heard Karen too, mind you. Clear as day, so there's no way I could have imagined it.